Happy Tuesday. It is Tuesday, June the 3rd in the year 2025, and welcome to another edition of Tuesdays with Tom. Well, last week we got to see Michael Joseph Jackson, or otherwise known as the King of Pop, in New York City in the musical MJ. It was awesome. You know, Michael Jackson solo career band began in the 70s. But just a couple of quick things about him. He was the first artist to have 7 top 10 singles from one album and to have a song debut at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. He was the first artist in music history to have top 10 singles in 5 different decades on the Billboard Hot 100. The musical gives insight to his family growing up, what that was like, his devotion to family, his philanthropy, which isn't talked about enough. And so we were just very, very fortunate to have witnessed it. It was an event. It was an awesome, awesome, awesome event. Our G-List guest today is Harold Jackson. Harold Jackson is the winner of the 1991 Pulitzer Prize for editorial writing. He grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. During the Civil Rights Movement in 1968, became one of the first Black students in the University of Alabama's high school journalism workshop. He's traveled around. He graduated from Baker University in Kansas, became a reporter for the Birmingham Post-Herald, subsequently worked for UPI, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Birmingham News, and the Baltimore Sun. We look forward to having that conversation today. Our show today, of course, is brought to you by the consulting firm of Best Girl Inc. Let's hear from Best Girl.
Best Girl is a consulting firm that provides customized leadership, access and inclusion, public relations, communications, and organizational consulting services. Clients include Fortune 500 companies, utilities, higher education institutions, small businesses, and associations. Best Girl's team of consultants, led by Joyce Gilly-Gossam, Emily Hedrick, and Sean Jones, partners with business and education clients to promote organizational effectiveness, communication, motivation, and leadership, with always an impact on the bottom line. Best Girl's customized consulting services include strategic planning, corporate communication, executive coaching, fundraising, and economic development.
Best Girl continues to customize the solution that fits your needs. So, let's get to our roundtable discussion with Barbara Wallace Edwards and Michael Walker. Good morning, Barbara Wallace Edwards and Michael Walker.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you all doing this morning?
Doing well. How y'all doing?
Doing great, thank you.
We're doing okay. Doing okay. You need a glass of water. 9 sips.
It ain't helping. So, Barbara, what you got for us this morning?
Tom, I want to start by saying first, a thank you to my classmates. My high school class celebrated our 50th reunion this past weekend down in Mobile. CF Viger High School. Chance to see.
What's the name of the high school again? I'm sorry.
CF Viger High.
Oh, I remember Viger. Yeah, we played you guys.
Yeah. So it was wonderful. We reminisced about some things that happened back 50 years ago. It was so exciting to see some people again I haven't seen since graduation. Some I recognized, some I didn't.
Well, I was going to ask you if everybody had on name tags.
They had to, because there were people you had no clue who they were. But we had the best time. It actually started on Thursday, went through Sunday evening. We had a full itinerary of fun things to do and got a chance to meet some of their family members. And it was just a great, great time. So hats off to the planning committees. They did a lot of hard work and pulled it off. It was wonderful.
Everybody got along?
Oh, yes. Everybody got along really well.
Was your school integrated? This was what, the 70s?
Yes, we talked about that. Our freshman year, 1972, was the first year of forced integration. And so our freshman year, we entered the school and was scared to death, not just because we were entering high school, but it was such a new situation for everyone with integration being forced at that time. So There was a lot of turmoil, a lot of fighting going on. Our first month of school, we'd never win a full day of school because they start fighting about lunchtime or something, and school had to be dismissed. So it was turbulent times, but we made it through. And so our class was the largest class up until that point to have graduated from Viger. And so it was, like I said, it was just great to get everyone
You didn't
back
have any
together.
fights at the reunion, did you?
Not one, not even an argument at the reunion. It was wonderful. Yeah, everyone got along really well. So
That sounds great. That sounds
yes.
great. Our group has been talking. We had a couple. I think we had a 10-year and a 20-year, and they've been talking about doing one. I think the 50-year there was COVID or something, and so it didn't happen.
Okay.
But they've been talking about doing one. But we have factions in our class. And
I understand.
we have political views that everybody doesn't agree with. So
Right.
it's just best to keep a distance.
Yeah, I can understand that. And I'm sure there's probably some political differences in our group as well, but that wasn't discussed at all over the weekend, thank God.
Good.
So we had a great time. It was a very diverse crowd, and like I said, everyone got along really well. Food,
That's
fun,
great.
activities was just great.
That's great. That's good. Michael, what you got this morning?
Well, I'll just comment on that. I have a reunion coming up in about 2 weeks or so at Auburn High, and it's our 50th reunion as well. So it'll be interesting. I think our class is a little bit different. I'm sure there are a lot of diverse opinions when you talk about politics and what have you, but the past reunions we've had, it's always been about what craziness we got into when we were in high school and stuff like
Right.
that. And it's more talking about the fun times and what have you. I think our class was a little bit different. I don't know. My class reunion, we were probably, I remember, I think probably in fourth grade when we started integration and stuff. So my class, we kind of grew up together. So it's a little bit different, from that standpoint. But,
Right.
you know,
And Michael, I actually started integrated schools, and I was in the fifth grade, but this was before forced integration.
okay.
Mom actually campaigned for us to be able to integrate and attend the elementary school, which was 50 feet from my backyard. When we first moved into that community, my family bought that house because of the proximity to the school to our house. And then for the first 4 years, I wasn't allowed to attend school there. So, yeah. And then
The,
fifth grade year, my family was the first to integrate the elementary school in our community. So,
Oh wow.
And it was the first fourth grade at one school building, which was about a mile down the road, and the fifth and sixth grade was in a totally separate building. And I was the only fifth grader in my family, of course, that was attending that school, and so I was the first to attend that school. And I can tell you, there were some days that were not pleasant at all, but thank God
That's
we survived
interesting.
it.
I learned back in the fall that when President Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, it's 1964, that Bishop Tulin, I went to Catholic schools,
Right.
Bishop Tulin decreed that all the Catholic schools in the state of Alabama would be integrated.
Right.
And so that was around 65.
Right.
And there was a group of, I guess they were juniors maybe, who came from Immaculata High School, which was the Black Catholic high school, and went to John Carroll High School. My group, we came in as freshmen in 1966. And we never had a whole lot. I don't remember one fight.
Wow.
And it was this guy, I'm not going to say his name because somebody will know him out there, but he was what you would call back then a sissy. It didn't mean he was homosexual. He just was kind of effeminate,
Right.
and guys
Right.
called people sissies. Didn't have anything to do with sex or anything.
Right.
And so this other guy who thought he was tough, they got to bumping on the stairway or whatever. And so at our school, the big thing was meet me in the park after school. And there was a big park across the street from the school. And everybody would go over there and gather around, boy, when it was going to be a fight.
Right.
This guy went over there, the guy who we thought was kind of effeminate, he beat the crap out of the other guy.
Oh my God.
It was like that. And the guy who we thought was a sissy was black and the other guy was white.
Right.
That's the only fight I remember, man, amongst black and white folks. It was
Wow.
but he beat the crap out of him, and they didn't bother him anymore. They didn't call
they did.
Anymore.
He didn't have to worry about that anymore the entire 4 years.
No, he did. It was interesting.
Hey, that's that old saying, don't judge a book by its cover. And
that's right. We came down to Mobile. We would come to Mobile once a year and play McGill and Viger.
Right.
Over a weekend. Play one Friday night, play one Saturday night. And then the bus broke down on the way back. And we were on the side of the road. The cheerleaders were on the bus with us. And so we just kind of turned it into a party till they got the bus fixed. And just doing Temptation songs and stuff on the side of the highway.
Right.
It was fun. We had fun.
Wow. So Tom, you got a chance to play against Robert Brazile, big Robert Brazile that was played through bike. Yes,
I remember him. Yes.
Yes. Went on to play for the Steelers and was very successful in NFL.
Yeah. He went to play for Houston too, didn't he?
Yes, I think he did play for Houston as well.
Yeah,
yes.
I think he did. That's where I remember the name.
Okay.
But so you got anything else? We got a few more minutes here. Michael, you got anything else?
Yes, I'd like to mention, you probably have heard this commercial called We Buy Ugly Houses and stuff. If you got a house you want to get rid of. Yes. Well, the guy that owned that, his name is Charles Carrier, and it's a franchise. I did not know this. He had one of the largest franchises for Home Vestors of America. So basically, Home Vestors of America is like the corporate umbrella. And then they sell franchises to people. And primarily what you're doing is you are borrowing money from investors, or investors are investing into your franchise, where you go and buy these ugly houses and then you fix them up, resell them, or rent them out, or what have you. And the investors get to receive some return on their investment. Well, he just pleaded guilty to the largest fraud scheme that cost investors $40 million. Wow. He was operating out of Texas. And oddly enough, what got him caught was he ended up pleading guilty to only one count of felony wire fraud for $200,000, where he did a transfer, I guess, that he should not have done. And that's what got him caught. But it's a total of $40 million. And they had people that were, just trying to get by, that was trying to figure out ways to make more money and stuff. So individual investors lost anywhere from $35,000 to $11 million on an individual basis.
Wow. So how was he cheating them, Michael? So if someone bought a franchise, he was not returning that money to the investors?
Well, see, he owned the franchise. And so based off of the structure of Home Vestors, they had it all set up how people would come in and invest. So he started out doing it the right way, where investors would come in, he was paying them 8 to 10% on their return and what have you. But he got to a point where he were overextended, and he started taking out loans on the property that he bought that exceeded the value of the property. Because when you go and borrow money on a house, they give you like 65% loan to value and 80% loan to value. Well, he started purchasing the houses that he would buy from people that he's going to rent out, resell, or whatever. He would go and extend and take out a larger loan, and the houses would be upside down. So then when they become upside down, it becomes a Ponzi scheme because it's not
Right.
enough income coming in to pay off
Cover the,
everybody.
yes. Oh my
So
goodness.
it churns.
Do you guys remember Ramil Robinson? Played
Yeah.
for Michigan.
Yeah.
Yes.
He was on American Greed the other day. Ramil Robinson sold his mama's house out from under her, and then said it wasn't nothing but a house. Why you all upset over a house? You know,
What?
his mom didn't have anywhere to
Wow.
live. Man, he was cold blooded. He
That's
really was.
cold.
He he did the same. Michael. Did the same. He went to this banker, convinced the banker needed money. Went to the banker, convinced him to make him a loan that he couldn't afford to pay back, and then he started putting money in the banker's pocket, and so they both ended up in prison.
Wow.
He was really.
That's cutthroat. Yeah, that's low down.
I tell you what, we got to move on. So let's go to Sean, and we'll come back and talk a little bit towards the end of the show so we can get our guest in.
Okay.
Sean, you out there? You got a minute for us?
Good morning to everyone joining in with us. My name is Shantia Jones, and this is Got a Minute. Hello, June. Tell me everything. June is such an exciting month, a time where we acknowledge celebrations such as Pride, Juneteenth, Caribbean, American heritage, and much, much more. June is also a time when the 19th Amendment to the Constitution granted women the right to vote. It was passed by Congress and sent to the states for ratification. During the Reconstruction era, the 15th Amendment was adopted, granting African American men the right to vote, but the Republican-dominated Congress failed to expand its progressive radicalism into the sphere of gender. In 1869, the National Women's Suffrage Association, led by Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, was formed to push an amendment to the United States Constitution. In 1890, Wyoming became the first state to grant women the right to vote. Fast forward to 1919, the 19th Amendment, which stated that the rights of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any states on the account of sex. Both houses passed of Congress and was sent to the states for ratification. 8 days later, the 19th Amendment took effect. Despite the passage of the amendment and the decades-long contributions of Black women to achieve a suffrage, poll taxes, local laws, and other restrictions continued to block women of color from voting. It would take another 50 years for all women to achieve voting equality. Thank you all for joining in. My name is Shantia Jones, and this has Got a Minute.
Well, all right. So let's go to our G-list guest. Hollywood has the A-list here on Tuesday. With Tom, we have the G-list. Now, G-list guest today is Harold Jackson, winner of the 1991 Pulitzer Prize for editorial writing. Grew up in Birmingham during the Civil Rights Movement. Moved around, graduated from Baker University in Kansas, became a reporter for the Birmingham Post-Herald, and subsequently worked for the UPI, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Birmingham News, and the Baltimore Sun. Let's welcome Harold Jackson. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm fine. Good to see you, Tom, Barbara, Michael. Good to be with all of you.
Good to see you, man. So we're going to start off here. Barbara's got a question for you, and then we'll do a run. If we don't ask anything you want to talk about, you bring it up.
All right, Tom.
Good morning, Mr. Jackson, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Barbara.
I noticed that in 1968, you became one of the first Black students at the University of Alabama's high school journalism workshop. Tell us about that experience. I know we talked about earlier in this show being the first Black sometimes is very difficult, but tell us about that particular experience.
Well, it was my first time being in an integrated experience like that. I also was a member of the Birmingham Youth Presbytery about the same year when I was about 14 years old. much smaller setting. But on the Alabama campus, it was during the summer. There weren't many students there at all. I didn't have much interaction with my fellow white students. Only about 12 of us. And, I think they were as shy or fearful of me as I was of them. But it was a very good experience in terms of the journalism. I tell people that gave me on the path to my career, 45-year career as a journalist. You guys were talking earlier about reunions. I just had my 50th college reunion last week. But also, you talked about going to integrated schools. I attended all Black schools for the first 11 years of my education. My senior year of high school, my high school, Ullman High in Birmingham, was closed.
Right.
And then we went to Ramsey High School. Half of us went to Ramsey and half went to Parker. And again, I don't recall any incidents, racial incidents that year, but I never got over the fact that I didn't get a chance to have that senior year at my high school.
Right.
So, but the Alabama experience was great. I still do some things with the University of Alabama. In fact, they are the publishers of my book, University of Alabama Press.
Wonderful. That's great. But you ended up at Baker University in Kansas.
Yeah, which was a different experience as well, because now I was in the Upward Bound program when I was in high school, which is underprivileged students. I grew up in a housing project.
Right.
And for 3 summers, I actually spent about 5-6 weeks on the Miles College campus in Birmingham, all Black HBCU.
Right.
But I decided to go to a school that had a journalism major. I won a journalism scholarship from the National Newspaper Publishers Association, which is a Black group, and Coca-Cola USA. And I had to go to a school that had an accredited journalism program. I chose Baker. It was a small college in Kansas, mostly white, 800 some students, only 60 of us Black. But we were, this was the 70s, we might have been a small group of Black people, but, we were together and we tried to be active in civil rights activities and considered ourselves, even on this small campus, as being somewhat militant in our perspective in terms of Black rights.
Wow. Thank
we
you.
all saw ourselves as that, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Michael?
Thank you for being with us, Harold.
Thank you, Michael.
It's funny with all us sitting around here and reminiscing about when we started school and what was going on, the political climate, and you talk about the diversity issues then, and now today we still have them. And I recall having a conversation with my grandmother when I was leaving the 3rd grade, and she was telling me that I was going to go to this school in Auburn called Lee Academy, which was a private school. And I said to her, well, how many other students like me will be there? And she says, no, you'll be the only one. And at that time, I learned negotiating skills. So I was able to negotiate going to another school where I wouldn't be the only one. I may be one of 10 there. So that brings back a lot of stuff. Let me ask you this question about the media and what's going on now. And we have somebody in the office that is a master of manipulating the media. But the question that I have, and Tom and I both have a background in news and what have you, at one point, being in the news and being a news reporter or a television news reporter, it was providing a service to people, more like being of a public service. And then it shifted to becoming hot takes or opinionated and trying to shift and control the news. When did that start, and what started that shift?
Yeah, I think a lot of it I think there's always been that bias there. There's always been that separation. Working for a newspaper, we always said there was a wall between what was opinion and what was news. And that wall existed for decades and decades. You've always had rich people who own newspapers who also decided they would not break that wall between what was news and what was opinion. Probably started changing, I think, in the 90s, really. And with the advent of Rupert Murdoch taking over Fox and changing Fox news operation into one that was certainly oriented toward a specific point of view, it was a model to make money. And as broadcasters, they found that this was a way to make more money. As Fox News became more popular, as people decided that this is the type of news we want, it became a model that was adopted by others as well. Now we're finding that with the demise of the newspaper industry, that a number of newspaper owners have decided that, if we slant our news a certain way, if we break this wall between what's news and what's opinion, we might find a better model to earn us revenue. So it's evasive now. We see it as a model used for revenue, not to just to inform the public. We find news stations, TV stations, local TV stations. You'll see what they present may not be slanted toward a certain opinion, but it's slanted toward a certain type of news that will draw eyes to the screen. I think we see too much violence on local news. I mean, we see violent stories from local areas. If it happened 200 miles, 500 miles away, if there's video that shows a violent event, we find it on local news. And I think that affects the public as well. I think people feel that they're less safe than they actually are because things that always happened in these neighborhoods and these communities are now being displayed on our screens, on an hourly basis, minutes basis, if you're looking at it on the internet. So I think that the things really changed in the late 20th century. I think things began to change. And now we find that that's the model that people use for revenue. If you can find an audience that's attracted to the type of opinion you're presenting or the type of news you're presenting, and you don't worry about the rest. It's not an attitude that we need to present news or opinions that appeal to a general public. No, we just need to attract eyes and ears to a specific public. And they may pay for the opportunity to hear what they want to hear and see what they want to see.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. I appreciate that explanation. And then you think about of all the miscommunication out there, and it's all agenda driven. So no wonder people are so confused. Like the Temptations say, the world is a ball of confusion.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you find a lot of that now. We have a president right now who's manipulating that to great effect. Take what's happening with the White House press corps. It used to be that if you remember the White House press corps, you got to sit in that room and ask the president questions. You had to have certain credentials. You had to have a certain background. Your organization that you represented had to have certain stature. And he changed all of that. He decided if I can find a podcaster or someone to blog that agrees with my point of view, then they're going to get White House credentials. So they'll ask me questions that I want to answer. And venerated news organizations like the Associated Press are being denied entry into those briefings, being denied access to the president, being part of his parties when he was on Air Force One. So everything has changed. It's all about revenue. We know with this particular president, with him, it's all about money. People accuse him of being racist and other things. I say, well, he is racist. We can see that in some of the things he does. But more important to him than race, to me, is money. And if there's a way for him to find an angle where the people he's around or that he is able to achieve a greater amount of money in some type of way, that seems to be his greatest motivation. So when you look at Donald Trump, look at where the money is going.
Harold, growing up in Alabama, we grew up in Alabama at the same time. And Governor Wallace was the manipulator of the press, public opinion, so on and so forth. I always said that the guy down here in Florida, DeSantis, governor, reminded me a lot of Wallace. Because Wallace came back later and said, well, I was just getting elected. And I think today, getting elected is more important than telling the truth and a whole lot of other things that used to be important. Don't seem to be as important today. And I know you've got a short time with us, so I want to talk a little bit about your book. Tell us about your book, Under the Sun.
Well, the book is called Under the Sun, A Black Journalist's Journey. And I tell people that under the sun comes from the book of Ecclesiastes, where it says, all is vanity and vexation under the sun. So keep as Earth, Wind, and Fire says, keep your head to the sky. And in the book, I tell a story about Wallace because, one thing about Wallace that I appreciated is that he was a populist, a true populist, which meant that his appeal really was to people who didn't have means, poor people and people who were trying to struggle. And when he ran for president, that became more evident because he lost a lot of that segregationist talk. He didn't talk that way. And, we find people like Donald Trump today who pretends to be a populist, but he really isn't. But a lot of people who look to him are looking for a populist candidate. The story I have in the book about Wallace is that after my freshman year in college, I had a summer job in Birmingham, and it was at Spain Rehab Hospital. It was the summer of 1972, and I had a little errand, I was just an errand boy around there. 1972 was when George Wallace got shot in Laurel, Maryland, while he was running for president. and they brought him to Spring Hospital for rehabilitation. He was there for a number of weeks, and at the end of his stay there, they decided they would have a reception so he could thank all the Spain employees for being a good host to him and serving him. And they had a assembly there, and they had a long line of people, all the employees of Spain, standing in line waiting to shake George Wallace's hand. And I was in line too, even though I was just a temporary employee. And I was standing in line. We were chatting, people black and white. And I got within about 100 yards of Wallace. And I thought about growing up in Birmingham. I thought about the 4 little girls that got killed. I thought about my mother not being able to take me to a bathroom when I was 4 years old and having to find an alley for me to urinate because department stores in the 1960s, early 1960s, there were no bathrooms for black folks in the department stores. I thought about some of those things, and I got within 100 yards of Wallace, and I just walked out of the line. I don't know if he noticed, I don't know if anybody noticed, but I just felt like I could not, there's no way I'm going to shake this man's hand. But later I worked for UPI, I worked for the Birmingham Post-Herald, and I went to events where Wallace was there, and I covered him and got to ask him questions and stuff like that. I never shook his hand, but that was a professional responsibility of mine. But back then, even as a young man, I just felt like and he did mellow as he got older. But back then, I could not forgive him for the things that he did, the things he said, really more than what he did. Here's a guy who apparently grew up with little black kids growing up because he was poor too, which is why he was a populist. But he forgot all of that when he became a politician and decided segregation forever, saying that was the way to get there. So the book is about stories like that, Tom. It's about my growth as a journalist. I worked in 5 different cities for 5 different newspapers and a wire news service in 4 cities. I worked in Alabama, worked in Pennsylvania, worked in Texas, and worked in Maryland. And seeing the newspaper industry change, the media industry changed over those years, where we're more digital now, not more digital. We are digital, and if people don't accept that, they're not accepting the fact that newspapers as print publications are dying and probably will all be dead. I mean, in Alabama, you can't get a print Birmingham News or Mobile Register, it's all digital now, and that's the way of the world right now. My book, is still in print, but you can get it digitally as well. And, it's published by University of Alabama Press, which, as Barbara alluded to with her question, is really where I think I started my career, at the University of Alabama as a high school student in their journalism program for high school students.
Governor Wallace, we would fly out of Montgomery to go play games. He would always come and see us off, and it was a big deal amongst my teammates that you gonna shake his hand, Gossam, you gonna shake his hand. It's like, hey man, he's the governor. Am I gonna be the only?
Exactly.
Not shake his hand.
Yeah.
But he came up to me, I'll never forget it, and he put his hand on my leg, and he said, "Believe it or not, I'm on your side." I still don't know what the hell he was talking about.
He was talking about.
I remember that.
I understand that. As I said, I think that there was of course I didn't know him well, but I thought there was a certain humanity to Wallace. When Jesse Jackson ran for president in the 1980s, I guess it was, and Jesse was a populist too, and he tailored his message for the particular audience. There were a lot of white people that voted for Jesse back in then, because he had a message that was geared toward telling people who don't have much, I'm for you and I want you to have more than you have. And Wallace was that type of national politician as well. Racist, yes. Segregationist, yes. But, at heart, he was a guy that grew up poor and still understood those people, as opposed to our president now, who was a rich boy, has never had to work hard for anything. And yet you have people who work hard every day and struggling, who support him. And it's hard to understand that, but, he certainly in some respects speaks their language.
Yeah, he does, obviously. Barbara, Michael, anybody got another question?
Harold, let me ask you this question. You may have already kind of touched on it, but I just wanted to have a little more clarification. When we have elections and what have you, and people are buying airtime on the television and the radio and what have you, they can speak or mention any kind of falsehoods that they want in that ad space. and the television station or radio station has to play it even though it's factually wrong because it's a paid advertisement. Why is it that the laws are such that a broadcasting station doesn't have to point out whether things are right or wrong? They can just go ahead and broadcast a falsehood for a candidate.
I think, and I'm not exactly familiar with the law, but I think there is some discretion within the law. I know in the past, you didn't see as many false advertisements, even in campaign ads, as you do now. Again, I think revenue is the motivator, and perhaps the stations aren't as scrupulous about that. The other check on that is that, there's not enough reporting on the lies itself. Again, there's some reporting when someone will say something that's obviously untrue, people will find out about it. But again, in this day and age, even that false advertising will continue to exist as fact because people aren't reading newspapers like they used to. They're not. They're watching their own television channels that they want to subscribe to, and so they never see those facts checked. I think before when a politician felt like I might say this in my ad, but it's going to be checked in some way. There's going to be a story in the newspaper the next day saying he lied, or the TV people are going to be news people are going to say he lied. And you're seeing less and less of that. We're not seeing enough of that. Even in press conferences, I watch the news and I see reporters questioning politicians, and they'll ask a question, and it's obvious that the guy is not speaking the truth or is eluding the question. And they don't follow up. They'll go on to the next question. I'm saying, why don't you follow up? Press him on that. Make sure he answers the question you actually asked instead of moving on to something else. So, I feel like that we in the news media, those who remain in the news media, I say I still am. I wrote like more than 40 editorials for the Philadelphia Inquirer last year as a freelancer. So, I'm still in the business, even though I'm retired. I think we have to be responsible in the news media as well. If we can't just bend over when someone is evading questions and speaking untruths and waiting to correct it on the record later. When we have them in front of us, not a paid ad, but when we have them in front of us, make sure they're telling the truth, make sure that they adhere to answer the questions that we're actually asking them. So that's some responsibility on us who are in the news media as well to make sure that the truth gets known. That's our responsibility. We have to do that.
Barbara, you good?
I just want to ask Harold one more question about in 1991 winning the Pulitzer Prize. Tell us about that and what that article about, and congratulations on winning that award, by the way.
Well, thank you. And, it's not an I, it was a we, because there were three of us who won the Pulitzer Prize for the Birmingham News. Ron Casey, the late Ron Casey, who was our editorial page editor, and Joey Kennedy, the other editorial writer. And we wrote a series of 8 editorials about the tax system in Alabama, how it discriminated against poor people, and it coddled the rich. And in a large respect, that's still the case today. The editorials did not change a lot. We changed, at least we got people talking about it, and so we wanted to Pulitzer for that, for at least exposing the inequities in the tax system in Alabama. It was great. I worked at the Philadelphia Inquirer a couple of years before coming back to Birmingham, and they were winning Pulitzers every year. And when I left the Inquirer, I thought, well, that'll never happen again. So it was quite a surprise. And I tell the anecdote, because we weren't expecting the Pulitzers, I actually found out that we had won when the announcement was made. I was in the men's room at the Birmingham News, and 2 guys come in there and wash my hands and say, "You won the Pulitzer Prize." So quite a shock, quite a surprise. It's the most amazing thing that would happen in my career as a journalist. But it's not the most amazing thing that happened in my life.
Right.
I'm a Christian, I have a great family, and we're all together in Houston now. So there are things that are much more important to me than that. But I'll never forget that moment. It's something I'll always relish.
Oh, awesome.
Great. So do you got any, when I was working at Channel 42, I covered Jimmy Carter and I covered, you got any stories that are things that happened that like, wow, this will never happen again?
Well, the Pulitzer story is about it. But, I think the thing with my career is, like I said, I've been to so many different places and never thought I would go anywhere. When I got that first job at the Birmingham Post-Herald, I applied for the Birmingham News straight out of college, and they wouldn't hire me. Jim Jacobson was the editor, and he said, "No, you're not ready." But the Post-Herald and the News were in the same building, that old building on 4th Avenue
Right.
North. And so I walked across the hall and was able to get an interview with the editor, Dewitt LeGrand, and he hired me. And, I was the the only black reporter at the time, but wasn't the first black reporter. People will remember W. Arnett Bryant had covered the colored people's pages news for the Post Herald, and Geraldine Moore covered it for the Birmingham News. But I was the only black reporter at the time at the Post Herald. But going from the Post Herald was amazing. Working for United Press International, I covered Bear Bryant's retirement. I covered Alabama football because he did sports as well for UPI. And I was I remember we covered his retirement, and we were the first ones, UPI, the first ones with the news that Bear Bryant's death. So those were things that you were really important to you as a news reporter to get to it first. And going to Baltimore and working there at the Sun. So there's just been, 45-year career. There's been so many things that have been just great, and I'll always remember and cherish. But I think getting that first job, DeWitt LeGrand hiring me at the Birmingham Post Herald, and we back in the 1970s, and relishing those days when newspapers were still old-fashioned newspapers, and you still had guys who had a bottle in the drawer and took liquid lunch breaks and stuff like that. So all of those memories, and going from that to the digitized journalism we have now, and trying to make sure that we know how to reach people on a digital platform, online. So it's been so much to relish and to think about. And the one moment would have to be the Pulitzers, but just the whole career is something I'll always cherish.
Harold, I know you have a short time with us this morning. Is there anything you'd want to talk about that we haven't asked?
We covered a lot of ground. Like I said, the book itself, I want people to pick it up because it's a story not just about me, and it really is about the transition of journalism over a 50-year period, but also the transition in America as well, because a lot of things happened over those past 50 years from the 1970s through 2025. And people need to be aware of what's happening. There's a lot about spiritualness inside the book, My Spiritual Journey, a lot about social changes in America, using the death of my brother, youngest brother, to AIDS to talk about that issue, and to talk about homosexuality, and to talk about religion in terms of my own religious journey, and how a Trump-inspired evangelistic church that I belong to in New Jersey changed because of what has happened to Christianity in America, evangelical Christianity in America, since Trump decided to use pro-life as a platform to run for elections and raise money for himself, in my point of view. So, I just really wanted, to express to people that I think the book Under the Sun is something that a lot of people can appreciate, and you can buy it. Amazon has it, University of Alabama Press has it online, but there are ways to find it, actually a bookstore to get it. So if you're asking me some final words, it's to pitch my book, Tom, Under the Sun, a Black journalist's journey, and I hope people will pick it up and read it.
Well, we certainly appreciate you coming on with us. It's good to see you again. It's been
Good
a while.
Good to see you, Tom. You're looking good, man.
And we're hanging in here, brother, hanging in here. Good to talk to you. And Barbara, Michael, you got anything else you want to say to Harold before he has to go?
I just want to say thank you for coming on and sitting down and talking with us and giving us an opportunity to have an insight into the medium, what's going on with it today. Thank you very much.
Well, it's just good to meet both of you electronically. Barbara, we met some years ago, so good to make your reacquaintance electronically.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Harold.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, bye-bye. Brother, we'll talk to you. So, put Barbara Michael back up, please. There you go. So, you guys got anything else you want to go back to doing our roundtable? I know he had to go. So,
right.
Anything from either one of you?
Tom, there is one other thing I wanted to mention. I don't know if
your
Michael
said you could mention the hospitality she showed you this past weekend.
Who said that? My sister. Yes, thank you, Lori Wallace, for your hospitality. She was a wonderful hostess this weekend. And Tom, she got on me because the week we had a roundtable and we talked about mental health. It was her birthday week, and I didn't get a chance to say happy birthday to Lori. So happy birthday, Lori. It's a little late, but happy birthday.
Lori. Okay.
But one of the other things I wanted to talk about, Tom, is I don't know if you all have heard, but after 233 years of pennies in your pockets, the penny is actually going away. The
Eat that.
U.S. Treasury Department has decided that this year will be the last year that they will actually make pennies because the cost of making a penny has increased so much. It costs about almost 4 cents to actually make a penny. So the mini penny is going to be going away. It's still, of course, to be accepted as legal tender across the country, across the world, but they will discontinue making the penny. So at some point, they will no longer be in circulation. So you'll actually make a purchase either rounding up or rounding down, depending, I guess, on how the prices turn out. So that's going to be interesting to see how that all works out.
It is going to be interesting. You know, there are some places that don't even take cash anymore. And,
that's true.
I can't really understand that because people used to didn't want to take your credit card or your check because they figured you might scam them in some way, so they always wanted cash.
Right.
Now they don't want your cash. You know?
That's true.
Card. And so, who knows?
Yes.
Where we'll go next.
It's funny you mentioned that. I guess we need to have our grandkids and grandkids to be start to save pennies. So by the time they get to be our age, they'll have something that's worth a little something from a penny, you know, because it now will be, you know, extinct and stuff.
That's right.
So I was just reading the other night where a 50-cent piece, I think it was silver, John Kennedy, is now worth $19 million.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. Say that again.
A 50-cent piece with John F. Kennedy on it. And when they first came out, they were silver $half and stuff.
Right.
So I'm sure that's the one. One of those is worth $19 million now. And I remember getting one when I was 5 years old, and it's at the house in Auburn. I got to go find it.
Yes, you do. You better find that, Mike. It may be worth a lot of money.
I asked you is because I think I might have one too. So I've always saved my change or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If I go, last week we were in New York, so whatever people give me change, I always just save it on the dresser there, and I bring it home and I put it in this jar. And I've always done that. I've always saved my change. And last time I counted up, we were going to Paris, so I said, well, let me see how much change I got. I had $1,100 in change. And,
oh, my goodness, Tom. Wow.
I got a jug, and right now it's about half full. So I got to go through and see what all is in there.
It's in there. You better. And don't be surprised if in the future the nickel is discontinued, because I think it costs about 14 cents to make a nickel now. So
I wouldn't doubt.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, Tom. I used to do the same thing. I had one of these big jugs like this, you know, and I had it ever since I was back in Birmingham, where I come and put my loose change in. And I carried that jug with me from Birmingham to Atlanta. And later on, when I ended up getting married and my wife was pregnant with Michaela, at those days, you know, you still didn't use a lot of credit cards and stuff. And so you use cash. I started coming home from the day that she was married, and I would just empty my pockets with whatever coins I had and $1 bills in there. And I did that until Michaela was born. And when she was born, I had saved up $1,100 or so in cash money, dollar bills, plus the coins.
Yeah.
And then I did the same thing when she got pregnant with Michael, and did the same thing. And I just had relatives, instead of buying toys, buy saving bonds or stuff like that. So each one of them, when they were born, they had over $2,000 in a savings account when they were born. So
my mom used to keep piggy banks for all the grandkids. When they were born, she'd buy a piggy bank for each one of them, and she'd start putting money in there. So every week she'd add money to it. And when they graduated high school, one of the gifts she would give them is their piggy bank. My oldest nephew said that he went to college. His 4 years of doing laundry was through his piggy. My mom presented him. He said because he didn't have to worry about it. He had tons of change. And so, you know, you never know how meaningful that could be to a young child, to give them a bank filled with just coins that you've collected over the years.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of coins, I have to share this with you guys. Over the weekend, young brother named Mikhail Baker graduated from I think it's Meadow Creek High. It's a high school here in surrounding Georgia, maybe up in surrounding Atlanta.
Okay.
But he graduated, and right after graduation, he had a shift to do at Burger King in Decatur, Georgia. So he rushed to do his shift. Didn't have time to change his clothes, so he was back there, I guess, at the fry machine or something like that, and also working the drive-through window with part of his gown and stuff on. And this person, a mother, rolled up and asked him what was he doing and why was he dressed like that, and he explained to her that he had just graduated from high school and he got a call that they were shorthanded and needed help, so he rushed in to work a shift. She was so impressed by that, she started a GoFundMe page for him. And since last weekend, it's now $130,000 where
Wow.
people were impressed with this young man and being so dedicated to go to work at Burger King. Because you think you just graduated from high school, most kids want 18-year-olds, they want to go out and party. He went to work
Yes.
at Burger
Wow.
King, and now he has $130,000 to help him go to college and stuff. And they have a picture of the lady that did it with him, and it's just great that something like that would happen.
Wow.
Well, that's great. Yeah. My dad said, you don't work, they don't pay you. So
Right.
kid wanted to get paid.
And he got paid.
Yes.
I think I might have mentioned this to you, Michael, but as we were boarding the plane last week in Atlanta, in New York, fly to Atlanta, your governor was on the plane, and sitting in first class, sitting over by the window. He didn't look up at anybody because he was trying not to attract any attention or whatever. But I immediately saw him. I said, "Oh man, that's the governor of Georgia right there." But I didn't go over and say anything to him because obviously he was trying to be low key, and I just thought it was interesting that he was there in first class. And Joyce told me she saw him when he boarded the plane, and some officers kind of escorted him to the plane and put him on there. So it was good to know that he was at least quietly representing the state of Georgia.
I will say this about him. He's very approachable. As a matter of fact, he's probably been the most approachable governor Georgia has had, especially since I've been involved in politics. And he makes it a habit. It's funny that when he's at receptions and what have you, he makes it a habit to go around and say hello to everybody that's there in the room and stuff. And, I've had several occasions where I just kind of avoided him because a lot of people are there trying to get pictures and stuff. And he'll look up and see me and call me out and say, "Hey, Michael." And I look at him, I say, "Oh, hey, man, how you doing?" like that. But he is very approachable. It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting to see the next governor, how he picks up and do that. And I tell you something else that's funny about him. When you go to receptions and they having alcohol and stuff like that. And so, usually elected officials, they don't drink. They just have water or something like that. Well, Governor Kemp will get him a Miller Lite and pop it and wrap a napkin around it. And he'll sip on it. And what he does is, when he has to go up to the podium, he'll have somebody stick it under the podium back there for him, and so he'll talk and everything. And then when he's finished, he can reach it and get it and then walk out and sip. But it's pretty funny. And he'll just drink a Miller Lite, and have a beer with everybody.
Good for him. Good for him. I know you had spoken highly of him, and I thought it was interesting that he was there on the flight, because I'm sure he could probably fly privately if he wanted to.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So that was interesting. So, anything else from you guys?
One thing I have to add, since you brought up the governor of Georgia, it looks like the groundwork is being laid for one BP Bruce Pearl to run for Senate. It started a couple weeks ago with Tommy Tuberville saying he did not want to see Bruce Pearl run for Senate for his job or his vacant seat when he runs for governor, because Pearl is doing such a great job as Auburn basketball coach. But since that time, just yesterday, another article from a Tennessee representative, a congressman named Burchett, said that he supports Bruce Pearl for the Senate. And so now people are starting to talk that up. So I guess that's a new pathway to becoming a senator, is to be a football coach, basketball coach at Auburn, and then run for that position. So it looks like the doors are opening. So I guess that would mean if Bruce did run for Senate, his son, Stephen Pearl, would be the coach in waiting to take over as coach at Auburn.
You think so, huh?
Well, yeah. I'm just reading the tea leaves. That's all I'm doing.
You're probably pretty correct with those tea leaves too, Michael.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I don't want to say. I don't know. Alabama has not had great representation, certainly under Tuberville.
No.
And
no representation under Tuberville.
I understand he's going to step in the governor's chair, and I guess Bruce will step in the Senate chair. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Well, Michael, there was also some article written that Saban should run for that seat. So that will be really interesting. I don't think Saban will ever get into politics, though, but it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, I don't see Saban running for something like that, for a couple of reasons. One, I don't know that his personality and ego, and when I say ego, I don't mean it in a bad way. I just don't think that would lend itself to being one of 100. In other words, when you've been king of the mountain. It's the same thing with our governor. They were trying to get Governor Kemp to run for the Senate job here in Georgia. And stuff, and he turned it down, and I just didn't see that. Once you've been the CEO of a state, it's probably difficult to go back and say, okay, I'm gonna be one of many over here and try to make a difference. I just don't see that with Saban nor with Kemp. But I could see that with Bruce Pearl just because it fits his personality more. In other words.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Good
luck to all of us. Good luck to the people. Hopefully people will come out ahead,
Yes.
We talked about Governor Wallace, and we talked about, Governor Wallace, and then his wife was governor, and looks like that's going to happen in Florida. DeSantis can't run again, so his wife's going to run. And politics just, I don't know.
It's strange.
Maybe I was just younger and didn't know any better, but I always held it on a higher plane than I hold.
And it should have been held on a higher plane.
So anyway, we'll see. We'll see where it all works out and how it works out. So I guess Bruce would be a Republican, I'm assuming.
Quite certain he would be.
Probably.
Yeah. And Tommy would be Tommy.
Yes, Tommy will continue to be Tommy. He lives in Florida, running for a seat in Alabama.
Well, it's funny. In that article, they listed him as Tommy Tuberville R for Republican, Auburn. Is what was listed in this article.
Wow.
So he's a senator from Auburn, Alabama.
All right. Well, let me close out here, and I appreciate Harold being with us this morning. And
yes, he was wonderful.
I remember him from the Birmingham News. I remember Birmingham News. The only time Black people would appear in the Birmingham News was in athletics or crime, and that became controversial after a while. But I'm glad he was there to usher in the change that was needed. Michael, you mentioned this earlier, but I've been involved with the media since I left college. in the 1970s. I identified with much of what he said and also recalled a few adventures of my own. A year after finishing college, I went to work for WBMG, Channel 42 in Birmingham. And as a reporter, I drove around in this blue Chevy Nova with a big 42 painted on each of the doors. Covered the city council meetings. I covered crime. I covered political events. I was there when Jimmy Carter announced his candidacy in Birmingham. And what was it? After shooting the day stories, I would cut tape for the main newscast at 10 o'clock that night with our main anchor, Robert Harper. He was good. I learned a lot from him. And then I would use that same material again for the late night news, which I got to do. It was pretty late, came around midnight or after. And after a while, there was a late night crowd who started to recognize me and know me as the 42 newsman. And that's what they called me. Hey, 42 newsman. You know? So it was a fun job until I had to cover the murder of Quinette Sheehan, a young woman who attended Birmingham Southern College, which was then located on Birmingham's west side. She had gone down to this hamburger joint and she was abducted, probably sexually assaulted, I don't remember. And what I recall is hearing on my police scanner that they thought they had found her body. And they gave where, the police were talking and I was listening. So I drove immediately to that spot. And there was an abandoned car parked down in this ravine covered with bushes. And man, I got there and I went over and I had my camera and they were trying to pry that trunk open. And when they pried that trunk open, man, and I was right there on it with my camera. And I think my heart skipped a beat because when that trunk opened, she wasn't in there. And I was so glad because I didn't want to have to see it.
Right.
And then later on another side of that neighborhood, they found her naked, had 2 bullet holes in her back. And yeah, I shot it because that was my job, There were other things. There was this huge fire covered in Bessemer at the sausage plant. I also interviewed Ku Klux Klansman David Duke. Sat down and did an interview with him. And I think we both kind of enjoyed it. It was fun to ask him questions and he would answer as honestly as he could. And so I talked to one of my old colleagues at Channel 42 the other day, and he said they were thinking of having a reunion of those of us who were still around then, and I'd like that. I hope it happens, and I hope I get to go. That would be fun. And that's our show for today. I want to thank the audience. We appreciate you. Thank our G-Lit, this guest, Harold Jackson. Thank our sponsor, Best Girl Inc. Thanks again to the TWT team, Barbara, Sean, Emily, Michael, and Joyce. And that's it. We're in June already, man. June the 3rd in the year 2025. Remember, a day without a smile is a day. Wait and enjoy yourself. Make every day count. Stay safe. Blessings. Peace.